Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. This is the third in the series of talks on the 4 ways of changing the mind, the 4 common foundations. It's also, I hope, a talk that stands somewhat in its own right. In the second talk, we looked at Dungom, reflective contemplation, the way in which we consider one by one the various ideas of each of the 4 topics, and we take each idea and we spend precious, intelligent time with it in short, clear meditation sessions. In general, in the process of reflective meditation, one thing that we will be doing is clearing up whatever doubts we have, or we discover we have, concerning the dharma. It's very important. And so this particular video is about dealing with doubts. They do need to be dealt with, and they need to be dealt with sooner than later. Otherwise, they can be like a time bomb for our practice. The nature of doubt is to weaken our practice. In fact, the Tibetan term for doubt is yin-ni, literally 2 minds. And I think we all know what that's like when, for some of the time, you feel this, and then at other times you feel that, and these 2 things are in not at all the same place. Sometimes they're in conflict, or sometimes this is pulling you one way and this is pulling you another way. Doubt, two-mindedness, hesitation, lack of clarity. These are what are generally meant by doubt. And they slow us down, they hold us up, or even make serious obstacles. Now, the opposite of doubt is faith, trust. And in our Kagyu tradition, for the Mahamudra teachings, more generally, for all of the Vajrayana teachings, faith and trust is the vital component. Our great teacher, Khenchen Trungpa Rinpoche, made it very clear. All of the other teachings and methods are there simply to give us faith, clear faith. Because the Buddha nature, purity, enlightenment, it's already there. Through faith, we learn to open to it, usually with the help of the lineage and the gurus. Everything's there for faith. That is what makes Vajrayana able to cover the whole journey to enlightenment so quickly. We don't necessarily have to have strong faith and trust to be a Buddhist, but then if we go the other ways, where we don't trust so much, then it would take much longer. Sometimes very much longer. So we need to get rid of doubts. And there are a couple of ways of doing this. One is through simply trusting the Buddha, trusting our gurus and the lineage, seeing them as wise elders, and that's good enough. The other way is to remove doubts through the clarity of our wisdom, our intelligence, through proper study, so that whatever confusion, lack of understanding, seeming conflict, paradox was there is simply removed by gaining more clarity. Let's look at the first of those. The first way is not something that's unique to Vajrayana, it's not unique to Buddhism, it's not even unique to religion. It is trusting those who've gone before. If you go to university to learn to be an engineer, a scientist, if you're an artist or an artisan learning to make pots on a wheel, whatever it is, then it is a very human thing to go to an expert. The reason you go to them is because they are successful. If it's an engineer, a road builder, they're building fantastic roads and bridges or buildings. If it's a brain surgeon, they are very successful in what they do. If it's a potter, then they're making beautiful pots. They have skill. So by seeing the result, then we are only too happy to learn how they do it. We don't need to take everything back to zero, put it into question ourselves. Indeed, if you do a science degree, like I was doing, then even just to take one of the thousands of ideas you assimilate back to zero and test it for yourself might take you a few years. So going to the wise and the skilled, and if they seem trustworthy, then trusting their advice is a very human thing. And we do that in Dharma, in our gurus, in our great lineage masters. Then we see the qualities that we ourselves want. They have this inner peace and strength. They've got beyond the attachment, the anger, the resent. Their meditation is full of all sorts of special skills. And their lives are helping hundreds, thousands of people. They show the qualities. And if it's, for instance, the Karmapa lineage, they've been doing this and helping hundreds of thousands of people, lifetime after lifetime. So we trust them. If they say this is what the Buddha taught, this is the way it is, then that's good enough for me. You can see it that way. The other way is by reason, by logic, by intelligence. And that is why we need to study properly, because very often people's doubts are simply because they don't really understand what the Buddha's teaching is anyway. They have a vague idea and say, well, I can't really believe in future lives. And in fact, that's quite a good example, because I know many Buddhists who've been Buddhists for decades, and they're still not certain about karma, cause and effect, about past lives and future lives. And this astounds some of our teachers, like the Taisittupa, who said, well, how can you be trying to practice something like Mahamudra or Vajrayana without that basic understanding? Remember, here we're dealing with the very foundations of the practice. It's vital. But people do have doubts because they didn't grow up in a culture that believed in reincarnation. So it seems weird or unusual. And then also these days, for instance, there's a relatively small movement in the last decade or two that would see the Buddha more as a social reformer, and to think that so much of the teachings about reincarnation and karma and so on were sort of developed and grafted on afterwards. Very much the way that some people see Jesus, mainly as a political figure, and that all of the religious thing built up afterwards. And these days, being fair-minded, we tend to think, well, if somebody's written a book and it says maybe the Buddha was after all just a political activist, and then on the other hand there are those who say, no, he taught this cosmic view of karma, cause and effect. Well, 50-50. But that's making just in that example, that would be to make a big mistake, because one person's idea and research is being compared with hundreds, thousands of years of successful history. The Buddha's teaching works. We see that in our lineage masters. They are the living proof that it works. They're the pudding, the proof of the pudding's in the eating. They're the pudding. And I've seen in my friends and peers people who have absolutely blossomed through dharma practice, through retreat, through 7 points of mind training, and so on. Mindfulness. So it works. Thousands of years of history for billions of people. And so that's another reason for trusting it. We need to resolve the doubts, either through sheer trust or through learning properly what the Buddha did teach, thinking about it properly and seeing the sense. In that second case, where we use our intelligence, then we do really need to persist and persist until we get to the bottom of the matter. If we leave our doubts unsorted, and then we carry on and we do the more elaborate practices, yidam practice, visualization, those doubts can come up later with a vengeance. They can become really destructive. We need to sort it out. So let's take the example of karma, reincarnation, rebirth. Let's say you have what we call a scientific approach. Well, what does a scientist do? You take various models. You don't have an obvious answer as to why things happen, why life is as it is, why some are rich, some are poor, some are sick, some are healthy, some live long, some live short, some are successful in their romances, others not, and so on. So then we have several answers, models. God, it's all God's creation. Pure accident. There is nothing behind it. It's just the accidents of life. Karma, cause and effect, and so on. We take the various models. And in the scientific approach, if there's anything that makes a model obviously faulty, not workable, we throw it out. And then of the models that are left, we see which one fits the facts best. And we stay with that model. So you take that approach to the Buddha's teaching. Whatever it is, one needs to resolve the doubts. Now, in this process of resolving doubts, if we go back to the Karmapa quote that you saw at the beginning of this film, it says it is through the personal counsel and advice of our teachers that we resolve the doubts. So if you can't resolve the doubt yourself, if no matter how much you think about it, you can't trust the teachings, you feel uncomfortable with them, it doesn't seem right, then because we do need to sort it out, we need to go and get help either from our personal guru or from reliable Dharma teachers. And there are two possibilities. Either the problems with you or the problems with the teachings. And both are possible. If it's with you, maybe you have a blockage, or maybe there's something you've not understood properly. And it's in dialogue with a good Dharma teacher that you can sort that out, and you should sort it out. Until your mind is in harmony with the Dharma. At last, it's made sense to you, or you've made a breakthrough. That's one possibility. But there's another possibility, and that is that particular teaching isn't the teaching for you. What does this mean? Well, the Buddha, as we know, taught for 45 years, to all sorts of people, in all sorts of circumstances, and he didn't give the same advice to everyone. Let's take a very simple example. Someone who's far too woolly-minded, lazy, laid back. Probably the Buddha, or these days a good Dharma teacher, needs to help that person to smarten up, get some discipline, bring a lot more discipline and order into his or her life. And let's imagine another person who's far too disciplined, uptight, quite rigid-minded. That person needs to be helped to relax, to have a broader view. The advice for one is tighten up. The advice for the other is loosen up, which is the Buddha's teaching. They both are. And these days, because with our shrunken world and internet and so many books, because we have access to so many teachings, you'll find all sorts of Buddhist advice. And it doesn't all suit everyone. There are people who are on the Hinayana path, Mahayana path, Vajrayana path. And what they need to hear is very different. For instance, the other day, I came across a quote from Dzongsa Chensei Rinpoche, a very, very good teacher. And he was saying, Dharma is not therapy. It's not there just to ease you and make you feel better with yourself. So he was talking to a certain audience, I don't know what one, but probably a Vajrayana audience, and helping them to understand that it's probably quite useful when the Dharma is uncomfortable and constantly uncomfortable, because then they can learn and learn. They're all the time being confronted with their own blockages. Well, that suits some people, but it doesn't suit everyone, and it's not the Buddha's blanket teaching for everyone. If we take another text, another example, Longchenpa's teachings, called Simni Nyalse, it means easing the mind. It means therapy. It means relaxing. And there are so many practices like Tara and Medicine Buddha and Chinrazik, which are there to bring peace and healing and to make us feel more comfortable, not all the time walking on broken glass and facing up to more and more challenges. There's a time for everything. And I've heard so much advice from lamas to people. I've had to interpret it, translate it. And that is so true. There is no one advice that's for everyone. And even for one person, as the years go by, they can be getting almost the opposite advice from what they had a few years before. So if you have doubts about the teachings, then it may be that that teaching is not really suited to your case and to your practice. And that's why, again, you need the counsel of a good Dharma teacher, and preferably the one who is your life guide, your own mentor, your own guru. That's very, very helpful. And especially because Buddhism's become such a huge thing. There is a part of Buddhism which is very simple. It's meant for simple people. They're not philosophers. They're not into intense Vajrayana practice going far. They're ordinary, everyday people. And religion is a bit of their life. And so a lot of that is based on blind faith. It's almost shamanistic. They need their people dressed up in fancy costumes, in contact with divine forces to help them. And it's helpful for them, but it's maybe not helpful for a Western intellectual audience. And what's helpful for a Western intellectual audience might be useless for a peasant in Vietnam or Japan or somewhere else. So if you have doubts, You need to work out if the problem's with you or if it's just with that particular part of the teaching. Whatever it is, we do need to resolve the doubts, either on our own or with the help of the teachers. That's why teachers are there. I think that's all. I hope you find the power of faith and trust, because real faith and real trust is the wish-fulfilling gem that makes Mahamudra work, that makes Vajrayana work. It is not easy. Sometimes, and especially at the beginning, it is easy to think of oneself as a person with the capacity for faith. But as you go along, and as you get to know your own mind more and more deeply, more and more subtly, you will find doubts. And this stage of reflective contemplation is the time to remove the doubts before we go on to the deeper meditation. In another series of videos about wisdom on YouTube, then I explained how we have 3 steps of wisdom: getting the information, reflective contemplation where we bring it to life and take it into us, and then 3rd step, meditation, where it becomes you, second nature. It's called meditation or total familiarity. I wish you all brilliant meditations on the 4 ways of changing the mind. Bye-bye. Take care.